I saw 2 golf videos this year which really stood out for me. One was Tiger Woods, and he was talking about so much of a golf swing for him, he can tell in his hands.
Right.
And I guess if you relate that, for me, so much with my foot, I can tell from the kick.
I want to get into your goal kicking chat now, and probably I know that you've made a couple of changes this year, but one thing I did think was unique, thinking about you and also Tasman, is yourself, Marty Banks, David Harvilli, all kick off really low kicking tees. Is that just a coincidence, or was there someone who got you on there? Was Andrew Goodman? Did he start you out on the low tees?
Oh, old goody, he's on there. He still rocks around with the vortex in his backpack, mate, and that comes out really. He comes out and has a wee kick sometimes.
Love
He's a
it.
big long range kicker.
He could boot
Um,
a ball. He
he
definitely
can boot a
could.
ball. Yeah, he does bring it out occasionally. I know it sits in his backpack full time just for special moments, but I'm
Beautiful.
not. Yeah, I think that's coincidence with our group. I sort of grew up alongside Davey and a bit of schoolboy stuff. I've always used a low T, and obviously I came to Tasman while Banksy was in his last year, but he was using that. But I think it's a bit of coincidence. I think for me, the low T was, we'll probably dive into a little bit more, was the soccer days for me, the football days growing up. So, where you see my sort of goal kicks, definitely a bit unconventional, how side on I am, and it's definitely that soccer style that I know you talk about in a lot of your videos.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I guess I've always sort of felt. Even with my punting, it's a lot the same, to be fair.
Yeah, and like you say, unique. And I know that Ricky Flutie has been helping out with the Highlanders. He spent some time in England. Johnny Wilkinson's with kicking coaching there. Has he been able to help out with your technique this year?
He does in bits and pieces. I think for me, like it's very much like not really a normal sort of kicking style. And for me, what I put down to is like so much of my kick is on feel. I really struggle with the whole sort of like roboticness of a run up, and I have to be here and this. Like so much of my kick is about that feel. That really, I think he gives a few pointers, a bit notes about I might be a little bit jammed in my kick. Make sure I'm staying up a little bit more, just little pointers. But I think for me, most of my goal kicking journey has actually just been working it out for myself and how that kick suits me best. What are the little tweaks that I understand now about my kick? I'm very reactive to the ball on my foot. Is my foot in a strong position or scooping? Have I hit it on the toe, across the top, at the ankle? So many little things like that. Now, I think for the most part has been me in my kicking journey and really just understanding how to kick the ball, really.
And I'm wondering, have you tried higher kicking tees, and how did that go? If you have,
I have a bit. Like every now and then someone brings out the high tee, or you have a kick off Josh's tee every now and then. But I think because I'm so comfortable side on now that any sort of those high tees become more of like that league spinning kicks, or it curves a lot for me, and I struggle to get great connections. But I think for the low tee, it's just comfortable. My foot's usually low to the ground anyway, so it's just about me doing those little adjustments in the kick or working things out for me that you get. I actually had a message the other day from some wee fella, and he's like, "Oh, do you think the low tee is better than the high tees?" And it's like, I think it's really just a preference, from what a kicker gets into.
100%. And also you're owning your technique and you understand your technique and why it works, because you're so right. We get asked that question a lot. What tee should I start with? And it's quite a hard question to answer. But the other thing I've noticed about you is distance is not important. It's almost like you've made the decision that you don't mind if you can't kick the ball from big distance. Joshy took that kick in the final. So have you always thought that way, or when did that sort of light bulb go off?
I definitely, like you always think as you sort of growing up and that, you're like, I've got to be able to try and kick it from 50 plus and this and that. But I think more so over the last couple of years and like you say, I've been trialing little things and I've changed the technique a little bit here and there. But I think ultimately with the way I kick the ball, I'm so side on, like that naturally loses distance because I don't have a huge follow through of my kick. If I was to change to a big follow through, I'm changing everything, and I think that would sort of stuff me up, you know. So I think really it was, for me, what I've found is that purity of strike is sort of everything for me now. That purity of strike, I know if I hit that right, like it's going to be over or very close to being over, but I'm not going to get that from sort of 45 meters plus. When I'm trying to strike it too hard, that consistency of strike, that just goes out the window for me. So I think definitely in the last couple of years, really honing in on that purity of strike, and knowing if I get that right, I'm going to be going over, or if not, very close to going over. And that's something that I've really tried to hone in on for sure.
Purity of strike. What a statement. Love it. Very true. And definitely a low kicker, like that's a great mindset to take it into. I want to hear more about your pre-game kicking routine. It's the question we get a lot through Rugby Ricks. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
What do I do pre-game? So even if you do something in the morning of or night before, if there's something that you get through, and then also expand a little bit more on what you have to get through in a kicking warm-up for the Highlanders.
Yeah, sweet. I don't think there's anything too particular for me that stands out would be different in terms of like the pre-game stuff. Obviously, I have a really good kick around, captain's run day. I'd like to be feeling really good for that, which is good. Pre-game for me, again, I try not to think about too much kicking because you try and play all those scenarios in your head before they happen. And I understand visualization is great, but that might be left to maybe earlier in the week around kicking sessions. I try not to think about the game too much heading into that back end. You know, like you hear those experienced guys, and they're always like, "Don't play the game before it's happened. It's too much thinking." So I try to leave that feel good stuff for captain's run. I'm aiming just to feel really good and comfortable, trying to find those, like I talk about, just having the sweet strikes. So heading into that game day, like, you just feel really good about your kicking. My
if there
warm-up
was
usually would be,
like if I was to ask you the question, like for game day kick, what do you like at the end of it when you finish your running back into the sheds? What do you want to have achieved? Like, is it a certain number? Is it a certain feel? If you have 3 and you're happy, you leave it. Like, where you at with that?
for me, it would use, if in terms of a number, I think it would be, what would I be? I think I'd be 10 kicks for my warm-up. So for me, the first 4 would be, again, the first 3 of those kicks for me would be sort of feel kicks. So I'm putting them down 22 to 20, probably 8 meters. There's no real set there. It's just, I'm going to put the tee out maybe a few meters extra. I'm going to put the ball down. I'm actually not even going to step out my routine there. Right. I'm going to get back to a spot that feels good, and I'm just going to strike the ball. And this is even pre-game. I don't care if it misses, if it goes over. I'm looking for that strike, that feel good. And if I'm hitting that, I'm like, sweet, I'm in a good spot. That 4th kick for me might be up towards the 40. And that's when I'll have my first sort of run up or my steps, and do that properly. And then I'm probably from there having 3 kicks either side. And again, I'm not necessarily setting it perfectly. It might be just inside the 15. It might be outside the 15 or a penalty spot, and then out on the 5. And then it'll be same on the other side. But I like to do that just because if there's, like say if there's wind, you know, like It's just a bit of changing those spots. I like to have that last one always in the 5, just for that wind feel. If there might be a breeze, if there's not, cool. We're just kicking it. But it's not so much pinpoint for me. Again, like I say, like a lot of it's actually about the feel. If there's wind, it's the feel of the wind. The first few warm-up kicks are about the feel, the ball in my foot, just getting myself into a good place. So when I head back in, I'm like, sweet.
It sounds like you've got a real focus on learning from every kick. So even in those warm-ups, if you're missing, you're sort of getting a read of the strike, the wind, the
Yeah,
condition that you're then going to use in game, right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, like, obviously, again, like a lot for me around that feel. I saw 2 golf videos this year which really stood out for me. One was Tiger Woods, and he was talking about so much of a golf swing for him, he can tell in his hands.
Right.
And I guess if you relate that, for me, so much with my foot, I can tell from the kick. And that just resonated with me massively. He was telling which grooves he was hitting the ball from, the feel of his hands. And that really stood out for me in terms of my foot in and around my goal kicking. So that feel of ball on foot, I could tell so much about a kick.
Cool.
And the second one for me was Brooks Koepka. Someone asked him if he listens to music when he does like his practice rounds. And he's like, no, I don't listen to music because I can tell so much about my golf shot from the sound of the ball in the club. Yeah. And again, that was another thing for me is I could pretty much tell you for me, if that kick was going over from the sound of the ball off the foot.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit of work with David Galbraith while he was in at the Landers a little bit at the start of the year. And he actually got to a point in a few kicking sessions where I would never look at the post the ball coming off my foot. Yep. And it was the whole thing around. So same thing, the feel of the ball and the sound of the ball off my foot. And it pretty much could get them all being like, that's good. Nope, that's not good. That's good, without ever looking at the post. And it feels awful not to look up.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know, for the outcome. But got to a point where that was actually a little bit of my training now. Of when I kick the ball, it's like, okay, from the feel and the sound, yep, that's over. Yeah. So a lot of that really resonates with me around what those guys think about too.
It's so cool to hear you talk this way, because another question that comes through a lot is how many kicks should I be having in a session? And I think, like, as you go through your career and you develop and you speak to experienced kickers like you, that actually doesn't matter. It's the fact that every kick you're taking is the feel, learning from it, everything that you've explained. So instead of 100 kicks that you didn't think anything about, having 20 that are really deep in thought 100%. And understanding and the body, it's fantastic to hear. Kicking diary or recording yourself or all these learnings, are these getting put anywhere, or are that just in the brain?
I think mostly in the brain. Like you say, I tend to try and learn off every kick as much as I can. So that's when I say, like, I think I'm very responsive now to the absolute little things in my kicks. So I try to learn from them straight away. But I think most of it's in the brain, and it's only small tweaks for me now. There was a period there where I was using a diary, which was great. I think now I've sort of got to a point where I'm really honing in on that sort of base foundation of my kick. And there's only small little tweaks that I'm remembering, but I feel like I've got those pretty down. It's just that consistency of repeat.
Yeah. The last one on your kick that I want to ask you about is just your approach. I've noticed the changes that you've made in your approach, and almost a little bit of Percy Montgomery coming through with that, with being quite short. Why did you make the change? What was the change? And just talk us through that.
Yeah, so obviously it's pretty slow sort of movements for me. And I guess maybe over more so recently, I've found, again, when I talk about that purity of strike, because I'm so side on, and when I sort of had a bit of a longer run up, there's a little bit more room for error if I speed things up or that speed wasn't quite right. So I sort of, over the last maybe few years, I've taken an extra step out of my run up. It's actually funny that, like you said, that Percy one was actually something that I sort of mucked around with a bit around that Crusader game. And there was actually no steps at all that game in particular that I was measuring out. I was putting the ball in the tee, and I would step back out to a spot that I felt good. and I just kick it. And the next game against the Chiefs, I had an absolute mozzer where I think it was like 50% or less or something. I had an absolute blowout, but I've sort of taken it back a little bit because I was trying something in those few games, and I'm a short little step in. Actually, I'll take it back from there. While I'm standing there, I've even slowed that little bit down now where I'm actually looking at the ball for a little bit longer, which I feel sort of just brings that heart rate a little bit down into that, I don't know, more of like a still zone.
Yep.
I think previously I would look at the posts and I'd bring my line down to the ball and I would start my kick from there. I didn't really feel like I had a chance to just chill out for a second or two. So now it's sort of, I get a few more seconds looking at the ball before I slowly step in. And I feel like now I'm really finding that groove of that pure strike.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's just something I find.
Oh, mate, it's absolutely
help,
massive. One of the we do kicking reviews for Rugby Bricks, and you'll get 3 videos, and all 3 of them will have a different approach. And one thing that I'm big on is at the start of your mark is you've got the same energy, same speed, and same distance of step. And I think what you're describing there about taking that little bit longer really pulls into energy, speed, and distance of step. Because it just changes everything. If you're arriving at the ball inconsistently, then how are you even going to be a consistent kicker?
Exactly.
So it's really cool to hear you talk about that detail.